this might be the first horror movie that actually tricked the audience in believing it was real. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I hope you guys are having a great day. Today we are going to talk about something different. Not really, we're going to talk about horror movies, of course, but we are going to talk about the 1999 film, The Blair Witch Project. This was a movie I watched years ago, never thought it was good, decided to rewatch it, now we're going to talk about a deep dive of it. And I actually really appreciated this film. I actually thought the idea of this movie was so smart that the director just gave his friends a bunch of cameras and went to a town and just improvised all of it. It was all improvised. And that's like one of the most fascinating things. Now, was this 100% improvised? No. Like, they had a little bit of a layer of what's going to happen in this. But for the most part, no, this was all just improvised. I like the idea that they went to this town to figure out the Blair Witch, and they just asked random people, just strangers on the street, and said, hey, can you give us a story about the Blair Witch? Every single one of them is giving you a different story.
You've heard of the Blair Witch several times.
And I think it's so real. There was a part where the mom had her sunglasses on with her child, and it just was so real. I mean, clearly it's real, but like the way that this is presented to us as the watchers, because obviously people think this is real. This whole thing was real because of the way that the director set this up, that he made the actors all disappear before the movie was released to make a ton of money. Genius, by the way, just absolutely genius. And they made up like all this lore and stuff on a webpage for the Blair Witch Project, which was also really smart. The way that every single one of these random citizens are just talking about this, and they have no idea what they're talking about. They just got interviewed by strangers. This is not 2026. This is 1999, baby. When people are getting asked these questions, they actually don't know, and it's just more authentic that way. I thought that was a really brilliant way into bringing not actors into it, just regular people. And that's what I also like about this is the actors in this movie are not really actors. They were just there. Like I said, they improvised most of the scenes in this movie to the point where you're like, wow, this actually feels real. It's one of those things that's like, if you got real actors, this might not be that successful. Instead, you got regular people like you and myself where are just out in the woods and just really creepy things start happening. And I thought that was a really, really good part of this movie. I do like how they have you meet Mary Brown, where Mary is the one that survived the Blair Witch, and she also just like makes up her little lore about it. And of course, the three that are filming this doc don't believe her. They don't believe anything that's going on. They just want to go out there and meet the Blair Witch. And it reminded me a lot of like small folk town scares and rumors. Like when I was a younger man, when I grew up in my hometown, there was always the rumor of the Dog Man. And there's like a Dogman song, and every year you would always hear it, and the Dogman song would always get a little longer because he would always do another part of the story of the Dogman's like going to this city or this town.
A cool summer morning in early June is when the legend began.
Always grew in our folklore that the Dogman's real. Now, is the Dogman actually real? No. Liar! But it was just such a cool thing to rewatch this and just see a small town talk and express this is what actually happened. In reality, they don't actually know what's happening at all. I thought that was a really interesting part of this film, especially right at the beginning. So once they finish talking to Mary Brown, they go back to the hotel and they hang out and they're having a good time. The reason why I bring up the hotel part where they're having a good time is arguably the last time the three of them are together and having that fun. They enjoy each other because the longer that they're in these woods, they do not. The tensions grow very quick and it's almost believable. It's so believable if you actually ask me. You're like, wow, maybe the tensions would be this strong being lost in the woods like this. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. The next day when the three of them all leave, it's Heather, Josh, and Mike. The three of them all leave. They go off-roading. They go to a river and they talk to two fishermen about their Blair Witch Project, and guess what? They also explain there is some parts of it being haunted that some people never returned, and they asked questions about Mary Brown, and they said that she returned, wounded, all messed up, and even one of the fishermen with the hat on said, well, I one time was fishing and I saw a woman in white levitating. The other fisherman tells him he's lying, and they just laugh about it. Do they actually believe it? No, they even said they don't really believe in the Blair Witch, but it's one of those elements. It just builds a layer deeper of this folklore, this thing that's possibly haunting this town that people avoid the woods for. And I thought that was so awesome. It gives me chills just thinking about right now, because it's just such a vast, powerful folklore tale. I've always liked folklore kind of things, and it made me want to watch more of them. So maybe I'll have to add some more folklore stuff to my list, so I can talk about it in the future. I think one of the most important parts of this whole entire film is, maybe it might not be an important scene as you are a viewer, but I thought it was. It really hit me, and I had to write this down in my notes. But the way that Heather is slowly walking away from the car to enter the woods, the last thing you see is the car sitting there. Just sitting there, and maybe it's there for maybe 5 seconds as the camera's on it, and then they're back in the woods. And why do I say this is such an important scene? It's arguably important because it's the last time they will be safe. It's the last time you can see something that's not woods. It's the last time you have a chance of escaping, being back with humanity. That's why I thought when I looked at it, it's the last time she's ever going to see anything ever again. Because spoilers, none of them make it out alive. So I really liked that element. I thought it was a really good, tough thing. So then when we get into the woods, they're filming random things. They get to like this cave, and Heather reads a really spooky like part of it. I thought that was a really fun thing. It was very spooky, and the way that she would read it, she didn't even read it perfectly. She kind of messed up on it. That's what makes this film even better, is the way that, hey, you're not ever going to read everything perfect the first time. She clearly didn't have practice on it, which made it even better because she stumbled a little bit. And again, it makes you feel like these characters are not characters. These are real people. I really thought that was so good in this movie, that I just felt so engrossed, so committed to these characters, that I did not want to believe that they're gonna not make it. And then we get to the point where the next morning, they're only gone for a couple days. They're out in these woods for a couple days, and the next morning, they actually mentioned talking about they heard noises. They heard noises the night before, which is a very interesting thing. They're like, oh, well, we heard something, but they didn't really think too much about it. They thought maybe it was just like hillbillies, or maybe it's just the forest, which is true. I mean, if you ever walk down the woods, it is creepy sometimes, because sometimes you do just hear random noises, and it's mostly just branches falling. It's not actually something supernatural, but it's usually branches falling. But you, in your mind, you immediately thought, oh my gosh, it's Bigfoot. So it's one of those kind of things. And they do mention that stuff, but they just keep walking. And this is where things get very, very important. They get lost. And why I put it in air quotes is because Heather says they are lost for a brief moment, but she knows where they're going. She says, I checked the map. Even Josh checks the map, and then she's like, see, we just keep going here, and we'll make it back. We'll make it on this trail to the cemetery. I'm telling you, the cemetery is only like X amount of hours away. But again, you can already feel the tension with her and Mike. Mike's already like doubting her. He's like, I don't want to walk all these hills. We're walking hills and hills and hills just to see a cemetery. And guess what? They keep walking, and they don't find a cemetery. They find an area where it's covered in rocks. And what I mean by covered in rocks, I'm not saying it's scattered and just a bunch of rocks. These rocks are stacked in 7 piles. 7 piles high, and no one knows what's going on. They just think it's really weird. My first thought, the first time I ever watched it, I actually thought it was a cemetery. I was like, oh, this is a cemetery. But then I was like, why would there only be 7 piles of rocks? That's the first indication of the Blair Witch. And then that night, guess what? They start hearing a little more creepiness. So the group decides to camp out in front of these rocks to see if anything weird happens. And of course, nothing really happens, but once they are inside the tent, they start hearing more noises out there. And the next morning, Heather and Mike argue, and again, that slow, steady tension of these two bickering. Because Mike wants to head back. Heather doesn't, because she wants to keep doing this doc. This is her thing. Mike's just showing up for the weekend because he's like, whatever. And he does mention, he's like, I gotta go home because I work tomorrow morning. And it's like, that makes you realize how many more layers this story actually has, this movie actually has. Because are these actually actors or not? It's one of those kind of things. I really do like that idea of that presence. And it just makes it so much more impactful. So with that being said, they decided to walk back because it's raining. And guess what? Things get a little more intense because Heather mentions again, yeah, I think it's this way. I'm telling you guys. In 2 more hours, we'll be back home. We'll be nice and warm and everything like that. And guess what? She lies because she is lost. Heather's like, see, we're right on track. We're going to be there. And this is when Josh looks at the camera because, again, they have to take another campsite. They have to camp again. Josh says, that's not what I said, which is implying he never thought they were right on track. He believes that they are lost as well. And this is where things are going to grow more conflict. Because that night, guess what? More noises. And every noise is getting closer and closer to them. It's almost like the thing is crawling behind them. Like it's a slow dredge. Like when it's daylight, they're walking further away from it, and the thing's slowly catching up until it finally does catch them. And this is where the point where they wake up the next morning and they find 3 piles of separate of rocks. And of course, they're trying to figure out who put it out there. Couldn't be any of them. And this is where things get even worse because Heather loses the map. But she swears she still knows where it is, but she also believes that the guys stole the map from her. And guess what? They never did. And she's like, oh, we just gotta follow the compass now. You gotta follow the compass because the compass is gonna take us there. And guess what? They decide to go south and it does not work out. And when they get to the river, they're following the river. And this is where Mike starts breaking down. They all start laughing because Heather gets her shoes wet and they all laugh at her and she's getting upset about it. All that fun stuff. But again, it's the slow tension. They're laughing because they're like, what? We're so scared. But they don't know how to handle it. They're just so terrified of what's actually happening. To the point where Mike confesses that he threw the map in the river. He kicked in the river, he says. Now, this is such a crazy thing to hear because you're like, why would you do that? And then the tensions really rise, and Mike just flat out says to Heather, you didn't know where you were going, which is true. Heather had no idea. It was stated right at the beginning that she thinks she knows where she's going. She says, I think we're there. We were lost for a moment, but we're back on trail. And that's the truth. They were never on trail. They were always lost to begin with because that's what the woods wants you to do. The group decided, I guess we gotta camp here again. That night is where they actually do get attacked. You can hear like screaming from baby whales and someone's pushing the tent and they all just run. You're like, oh my gosh, like I actually thought something was happening and I checked and there's like a half hour left. So the tension's slowly growing. And when they return back to the camp that next morning, Mike's stuff is gone and Josh's stuff is covered in goo. The reason why we bring up the goo part is because Josh does bring up the goo. He's like, there's goo that covered my bag last night. And you don't really think about it after that. That's it. That's all you hear until they get to logs. And then earlier in the movie, they cross this river and it was so hard to get across because they had to go so slow across this log and they get back to it and they did a whole circle right back to that log. And it's very important because that's how they got back. And they crossed it already, and guess what? They had to cross it again. So they got lost. They circled right back to it. How? Don't know. Maybe it's because of the witch, or maybe they're lost. Probably both, actually. Let's be real. That's when the night before this chaos happened. And this is very important. Well, it's all very important. But in this part where they're all talking about like what to eat. They're all like, oh, I wish I could eat a cheeseburger right now. I wish I could have mashed potatoes. I wish I could have your mom's mashed potatoes. Like very heartfelt stuff. And it cuts to that. And the next day, Heather is staring out in the woods, screaming for Josh. Josh is gone. And Mike's like, oh, he's probably by the river. And she's like, well, he could hear us if he's by the river, right? Intentions are already really strong. What happens before that is Josh and Heather are just like mocking each other. And Mike finally says, guys, we need to work together. We need to stop bickering and figure this out. And it works out and they become more relaxed. And I like the moment where they all talk about, well, if I'm missing, my girlfriend will eventually figure out why I'm missing and she'll try and find us. Someone will find us because we are missing, which is true. Very true. I can't disagree with that. But again, when you're in the woods, you don't have a high percentage of getting found anyway. There's plenty of people that got lost in the Appalachian Mountains and they're gone. But they mention it's a small town. It's a small woods. We shouldn't be getting lost. We should eventually make it somewhere. Also true, but they never do. So now it's just Mike and Heather. And these two are like, we are staying together. One night, they sleep through it all. They hear some weird noises, and they hear Josh screaming. And you know what they do? They just stay there. And the next morning, they find a bundle of sticks with flannel tied around it. And when Heather opens it, she finds this little flannel, and she opens it up, and it's teeth from Josh. Bloody teeth. And she's freaking out. Now, it looks actually pretty good, especially because of these tapes. These tapes are just old. It's the 90s, so they're not going to look the greatest. It's going to look like this. Okay, not as good as this. To me, when I was like watching this, I was like, wow, that's actually really cool. I love the quality of this because it just really shows the age, the budget, I guess, for this kind of film. I thought that was a really cool thing to see. The last night together, you have the iconic scene where Heather has like the camera down and like up her nose. And I tried to take it seriously, but I kept thinking of Scary Movie 1. That's going to be ruined forever for me. But she accepts the truth that she is going to die. And she apologized to everybody. She's like, I apologize to mom, dad, my family, Josh's family, Mike's family, that they're all going to die. And she says it's all her fault. I thought it was a really powerful character moment. Granted, even though I was thinking of Scary Movie 1. The two of them stay in the tent until they hear screams from Josh. And guess what? They finally go after it into this cabin. And as where chaos ensues, Mike runs to the basement and he's dead. Heather goes to the basement. She sees Mike in the corner and then she dies. And that's the end of the Blair Witch Project. This is the film that I think people watch now, they're never going to say, wow, this was so scary. But during the time when it came out, it made a lot of sense why this movie was, for one, so popular, and two, why people actually thought it was real. Like, even after this film was released and all these missing person stuff was going on with the 3 actors, it was so smart. It made you truly believe these actors are dead. They're gone. What happened? Like, it was so believable, because people are like, oh, those people are idiots for believing it. But it's also like, they didn't have the internet. How could you believe and say it's not real when you didn't have the internet? You know, it's one of those things that I think a lot of younger people don't understand. And even myself, I didn't understand when I first watched the movie. But the older I got, I even asked my mom about the movie. My mom's like, yeah, we all thought it was real. Because the internet was barely a thing. So the idea to set this kind of tone for a film like this is just so genius. So I've always really enjoyed that element of the Blair Witch Project. If I had to give this rating, I actually give it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was a really fun movie. Was it scary? No. But I respected everything else about the movie. I thought it was really fun. It was just 3 people in the woods getting lost. Can't complain about that at all. If there's any other first-person movies you guys want me to check out, I'll definitely check them out. Maybe I'll do like a Paranormal Activity ranking video in the future. That'd be kind of fun to do. Who knows? Of course, make sure you guys, don't get lost in the woods.